Attention campers, it's time for Camp Lazlo. Airing from 2005 to 2008, Camp Lazlo saw creator Joe Murray's return to TV animation almost a decade after his original series, Rocko's Modern Life, came to an end. Just like Rocko before it, the show is filled to the brim with zany and strange characters. The cast of Camp Lazlo is a pretty vast one and ranges the entire animal kingdom. Not only do the characters span a wide variety of animals, but their personalities are also vastly different. Some are adventurous, others are rude, and some are rather whiny. But which of these campers deserve a badge of honor? And which ones would be better off walking back home? I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and this is Camp Lazlo, Good to Evil. As usual, we'll be starting out our list with the most good character, and working our way down to the most evil. These characters are the good. Who else is more deserving of the gold medal of good than Lazlo? Lazlo is your typical happy-go-lucky protagonist that you've seen a dozen times in other cartoons. Like SpongeBob, for example. He's nice to everyone around him, and he's always eager to make new friends. This usually works to his advantage as he is good friends with most of the Bean Scouts. He's even able to get them to do some rather outlandish things, such as convincing them to stop washing themselves. He'll also try to win over those who hate him, like Lumpus and Edward. He cares about everyone he encounters, even if they don't necessarily reciprocate it. Lazlo can be seen as the glue that holds the jelly cabin together. Raj and Clam didn't exactly care for each other until Lazlo came into the picture, as seen in the show's TV movie. Lazlo is also a very adventurous camper. He repeatedly tries to find fun activities he and the other campers can participate in. When the chips are down, Lazlo can make the best of any bad situation, like when Edward made an anti-Lazlo club. Lazlo made his own Nothing Club outside, which soon became more popular than Edward's own club. While Lazlo is as optimistic and carefree as he can be, there can also be a flaw in his character. His unassuming nature will often lead to him getting taken advantage of. Throughout the series, there were many times where Lumpus would use Lazlo's respect for him to his advantage. Meanwhile, Lazlo never truly realized how crooked the Scoutmaster was. Lazlo can also make some rather strange friends. He's befriended dangerous snakes and bears in the past, which shows that he isn't exactly the brightest Bean Scout. Lazlo's mischievous nature can also get himself and others into some dire straits. Several of the adventures that Lazlo has led others on resulted in him and others lost from the campsite. Overall, Lazlo isn't the brightest or most rational cabin mate, but his love of the camp and fellow Bean Scouts earn him the gold medal on our list. We're giving the silver medal of good to Jane Doe, a deer who leads the Squirrel Scouts. Jane is much like Lazlo in that she is constantly optimistic and kind. She loves her Squirrel Scouts and she's eager to find new ways to engage with them. She also enjoys the company of the Bean Scouts, which is something of a rarity for the characters who make up the Squirrel Scouts. She loves finding ways to get the two groups together and bonding, even if the Scouts feel differently. While she resembles Lazlo in his positive ways, she also shares many of his more negative traits. Much like Lazlo, she is unassuming to a fault. She is very hospitable, and this was a trait that was taken advantage of in the episode Dotting Doe-Eyed Dearest. In this episode, Edward and several other Bean Scouts take advantage of her motherly nature after seeing her pamper the dung beetles Chip and Skip. When she finally pieces together what's going on, she completely loses it. Jane Doe is also very naive. Throughout almost the entire series, she is entirely unaware of Lumpus's feelings for her, even after his many attempts to confess his love. Only after Lumpus proposes to her does she finally see how he feels about her. Jane Doe is certainly a ditzy scoutmaster, but she cares deeply for her campers, and she wants to see all of them succeed. She's a pleasant character to be around and an excellent scoutmaster, which is far more than we can say about Lumpus. The bronze medal of good goes to Lazlo's Squirrel Scout counterpart, Patsy. This mongoose is every bit as adventurous and optimistic as Lazlo is. In some ways, she may even surpass him. When the Squirrel Scouts faced off against the Bean Scouts in a pinecone sitting competition, it came down to just her and Lazlo. She emerged victorious, winning the event for the Squirrel Scouts single-handedly. Much like Lazlo, she'll do anything to help her friends out. When her friend Nina began hanging out with aliens who desired nothing but cheese, Patsy ate all the cheese at their festival. The cheese gave her an allergic reaction, but it also stopped the aliens' plans from coming to fruition. Patsy is positively obsessed with Lazlo. She loves him dearly, even if Lazlo doesn't exactly feel the same way. Her feelings for him lead her to be a lot nicer to the Bean Scouts than the other Squirrel Scouts. However, that isn't to say she is totally nice. As the most prominent Squirrel Scout featured in the series, there were several times where she acted as an antagonist of an episode. One plotline revolved around the Scouts arguing over which group the Mud Pits belonged to. The conflict was ultimately resolved in the Pinecone competition mentioned earlier. Another episode focused on Lazlo and his cabin mates being kidnapped by Patsy and the other Squirrel Scouts who believed they were actually aliens. A strange claim, but she is Lazlo's counterpart after all. And since she's Lazlo's equal, can we really place her any further down the list? She might be a bit rough around the edges, still, this Squirrel Scout embodies the same upbeat energy that Lazlo does, making her a perfect fit for the bronze medal. Next up, we have Nina. This giraffe is good friends with Patsy and can be seen as the brains of her crew. She'll be the first to point out when something sounds wrong, and she's the most cautious one in the group. She can be considered the Squirrel Scout counterpart to Raj from the Jelly Beans. She is very nice to those around her, making her perhaps the friendliest of all the Squirrel Scouts. She gets along well with practically everyone, be they a Squirrel Scout or a Bean Scout. Even Chip and Skip, who drove her up a wall in the episode Dungmates, eventually end up on her good side. Somewhat like those we've covered previously, she does have an issue with being taken advantage of. This is most notably seen in the previously mentioned episode, Cheese Orbs, when a trio of aliens takes advantage of her obsession with all things sci-fi and infiltrate the Squirrel Scouts' annual cheese festival. Even with this character flaw, she still remains one of the nicest characters in the world of Camp Lazlo. In a world with such a loud and crazy cast, that certainly goes a long way. We're going back to the Jelly Bean cabin with the next entry, Clam. This rhinoceros stands out from the rest of the cast through his quiet demeanor. He rarely says anything in the show, and when he does, it's never anything particularly insightful. He tends to only say one short phrase in every scene he's in, and it tends to be nothing more than a repeat of what somebody else has said. This would lead most to believe he's the dumbest of the main characters, but he is anything but that. He may actually be the smartest character in the series, as evidenced in the episode Prodigus Clammus. When Lumpus attempts to find a Bean Scout who is exceptionally talented, he is blown away by Clam. He can solve puzzles quickly, paint an exact duplicate of the Mona Lisa, and play music using a bottle. In another episode, he assumed the role of a therapist to work out issues Lazlo and Raj were having amidst their argument. He is not just insanely smart and talented, however. He is also exceptionally strong. He's a character who tosses boulders for fun. Clam may not seem like much at a glance, but he's truly a scout anyone would be honored to share a cabin with. We see him as a healthy balance between Lazlo's carefree spirit and Raj's more cautious ways. Speaking of, finishing off the residents of the Jelly Bean cabin, we have Raj. An Indian elephant, Raj often acts as the voice of reason inside the Jelly cabin. He's far more rational than either Lazlo or Clam. He's also quick to point out the flaws in an idea. However, Raj's cautious nature can often go in the complete opposite direction of Lazlo's adventurous attitude. Raj is quite the coward, especially in the earlier seasons. He's easy to scare, and much of the comedy in these first few seasons comes from him being deathly afraid of everything around him. One episode saw him overcoming his fear of the water, while another focused on him becoming depressed after losing his retainer. The latter episode also highlights Raj's self-centered nature, as he often has issues putting his own needs before his friends. Here, Raj's quest to find his retainer comes at the expense of his friendship with Lazlo and Clam. His selfish side may even make him the meanest camper in Jelly Cabin. At the very least, we couldn't see Lazlo or Clam get so worked up about such a thing. While he does act cowardly, Raj does eventually come to his senses and grows as a person. He'll always have his friends' backs and will be with them every step of the way. Even in situations he'd like to avoid, he'll follow them because that's what friends do. He's also the only character in the entire cast to pronounce Scoutmaster Lumpus's name right. Next we have Samson. This nerdy guinea pig has quite the reputation of being the laughingstock of the entire series. Indeed, Samson is far from being the coolest resident of Camp Kidney. He's seen as lame and uncool by pretty much all the others, with Edward in particular using him as a frequent punching bag. He even develops a minor rivalry with Raj of all people. He has notoriously bad luck, and it becomes a running gag in the show for him to be hit by a volleyball out of nowhere, even if it doesn't make much sense in that scene. Samson believes he has no friends within the camp except for his own inhaler. Despite all the misfortunes that come his way, Samson remains a friendly camper. All he desires are friends who will treat him with respect. He tries his best to get along with the others at the camp, and even had a few heroic accomplishments tied to his name. When aliens invaded the camp, he was the only major character who tried to stop them. His efforts eventually succeeded as the aliens retreated and made an attempt to infiltrate the Squirrel Scouts instead. Our next entry is the camp chef, Chef Mcmusley, a hippie goat who tries to get the campers to eat the same way that he does, offering tofu and the like. He despises every kind of unhealthy food there is, and makes an effort to see that nobody in the camp is eating those foods. He's an easygoing and positive guy. After all, he is a hippie. He tries to get along with all the campers, even if most of them detest the food he serves, though they don't feel the same way about him as he does them. He'll always try his best to keep them safe. This is best seen in the episode Meat Man, where a can of meat comes alive and attempts to harm the residents of Jelly Cabin. He springs into action to save them. In another episode, he consoles both Edward and Gretchen with their anger management issues. You get the sense that he truly does care about these kids. He may be serving food that they see as gross, but he feeds them with it because he believes it's a healthier alternative to something like meat. The only thing that really holds him back from being any higher on our list is that he is a pretty oblivious goat. He has no idea how much the campers detest his food. He'll actually serve meat as a punishment for bad behavior, utterly ignorant that it's what they actually crave. We end our good section with Slickman, a slug who acts as Scoutmaster Lumpus's right-hand man. He lives a seemingly miserable life. His boss, Lumpus, never pays him for his work, he doesn't remember his birthday, and he won't even give him a vacation. His life appears to be a sad one, but he manages to make the most of it at Camp Kidney. He gets along well with all the Bean Scouts, especially those of Jelly Cabin. Slickman even participated in a soapbox derby between all the scouts, aiding the scouts of Jelly Cabin in the race. While he answers to Lumpus, it's really Slickman who is the one calling the shots. He's the one who checks on the scouts' whereabouts and announces their plans for the day. His role as leader only grows as the show progresses, as Lumpus becomes less and less interested in being the scoutmaster. He's also a far more reasonable leader than Lumpus, who is far meaner to the scouts and doesn't seem interested in befriending them. Slickman sounds like a pretty nice guy, but there is one thing about him that forces him into this spot: his relationship with Lumpus. Despite being smarter and the far better leader of the two, he's almost always subservient to Lumpus. There are a few instances where he'd stand up to him, like when he was refused a visit to Slugfest, but it isn't a common occurrence. He's practically Lumpus's yes man, and he doesn't have much faith in himself to stand up to him. When Lazlo is criticizing you for lacking a backbone, you know something is wrong. Slickman is definitely a better scoutmaster than his moose counterpart, but he still has a lot of work to do if he wants a higher spot on our list. With the good section wrapped up, we now move into the neutral territory. This is the gray area. First up are the dung beetles, Chip and Skip. These two are members of the same cabin Edward is, and as such, tag along with him throughout most of their appearances. They're almost like henchmen to him, always being the strongmen in Edward's schemes. With that knowledge, you'd probably expect them to be lower on our list, as Edward is anything but the nicest camper. However, we feel Chip and Skip deserve a spot on our list right here. They are completely apathetic towards everything around them. They help Edward, but they share none of the evil intentions he usually has. Even so, their lack of intelligence often leads them to be more of a thorn in Edward's side than any actual help. They can also get along with the other campers well enough, whether Edward, Lazlo, or anyone in between. They're dumb for the majority of the series. However, in an episode where blood rushed to their heads after hanging upside down, they became geniuses. They used their newfound intelligence to create a computer out of twigs, fix Samson's kaleidoscope, and much more. Chip and Skip are just too stupid to be of any actual harm to anyone when you really look at it. However, at the same time, they aren't smart enough to be of great assistance. They're right in the middle of things, making them the perfect fit for the gray area. Next is the camp nurse, Nurse Leslie. A pink shark, Nurse Leslie gets this spot on our list because of his complete lack of care in the medical field. You can see how little Leslie cares about his job from how he gets around the camp. Every appearance has him glued to his swivel chair, and he's rarely ever seen without it. He doesn't really seem to care about the campers and sees treating them as a boring waste of time. His lack of care is best evident in the episode Parasitic Pal. In the episode, Lazlo gets a parasite attached to him. When he goes to Leslie for help, he says he's absolutely fine, even after the X-ray clearly showed the leech sucking his blood. Not only does he dislike the campers, but he also just flat out hates his job. He doesn't seem to find much enjoyment in life and leads an unhappy existence as a result. Despite his lack of care for the campers and their needs, he'll still help them when it's necessary. Overall, Nurse Leslie isn't a bad person, but his detachment from those around him and a lack of effort in his work put him squarely in the gray area. Moving on to Commander Huha. This bison oversees all the camp's operations and has quite the expectations of those under him. If things are not to his liking, he will go ballistic. For example, any camp that fails its harsh inspections will result in him revoking clean underwater from the camp for a year. With such a reputation, it's not hard to see why Lumpus is deathly afraid at just the mere mention of his name. You can look at Commander Huha as being modeled after your typical drill sergeant. He yells all his lines and expects only the best from the campers. Campers who have earned a large set of badges will be shipped off by him to a harsh camp, which he believes will build character. He isn't much interested in seeing men cry, as he disqualifies Edward from the Tomato Scouts when he sees him doing so. When he learns a Bean Scout has written a Valentine's Day card to his daughter Patsy, he swears he'll beat up whoever did it. He is absolutely the meanest character in the show on this list so far. Still, many of his actions are the result of his role as an authoritative figure. He does have a bit of a softer side to him, as he loves his daughter and praises Lazlo as the best camper to come out of the Bean Scouts, and will also give him points for taking anger management classes. Commander Huha is very much the lawful neutral character of the series, earning him his spot in the gray area. And rounding out the gray section is the Squirrel Scout Gretchen. If Patsy is the adventurous one and Nina is the nice one, then Gretchen is the mean one out of the trio. Unlike her friends, this alligator is never interested in getting along with the Bean Scouts. Gretchen is extremely aggressive and loves getting the chance to participate in a fight. Gretchen will even bully her own friends for a cheap laugh. She likes to joke about Patsy's infatuation with Lazlo in particular. In those regards, she is much like the Squirrel Scout counterpart to Edward, always bullying others for her own amusement. Even her own friends often get tired of her antics, as they aren't afraid to make fun of her in retaliation. Despite this, the three do remain good friends, and Gretchen will always do what is needed to make them happy. She's also had relationships with the Bean Scouts Edward and Clam, although both were relatively short-lived. We almost placed her in the bad category, however her glimmers of humanity and her role as a secondary character prompted us to put her in this last spot in the gray area. And that's a wrap for our neutral territory. Now we move on to the characters you probably wouldn't want to share a cabin with. These characters are the bad and the evil. The bronze medal of evil goes to the platypus Edward. Edward is the most prominent antagonist in the show, and you can view him as the sort of Squidward to Lazlo's SpongeBob. He utterly despises Lazlo, and he'll go to great lengths to make him miserable. He'll make an attempt to outdo Lazlo at anything, whether it be a race or a quest to become the camp mascot. He only gave Jelly Cabin a map for a rare rock, but in actuality, it was a map that kept the trio going in circles. Edward has even broken Lazlo's ankle and showed little remorse for the action. Edward may have it out for Lazlo, but he's not any nicer to the other campers. He loves to pull pranks on all of them, like in the episode Campers All Pull Pants. which focused on him trying to pants every Bean Scout. Even his cabin mates, Chip and Skip, are often the butt of many of his jokes. Slickman and Lumpus aren't safe from Edward's rude ways either. Edward is also quite the cynic, providing a sharp contrast between him and the ever-optimistic Lazlo. When the Bean Scouts compete in a game of tug-of-war with the Squirrel Scouts, Edward believes it's hopeless as Gretchen alone can win the game for the squirrels. He can also get pretty angry, and has definitely had his fair share of temper tantrums. Though he does usually get his comeuppance, he never decides to change for the better. His disinterest in atonement and a role as one of the main antagonists in the show are reason enough to give him the Bronze Medal of Evil. The Silver Medal of Evil goes to the Scoutmaster himself, Lumpus. The head of Camp Kidney, he is far from the ideal Scoutmaster. Simply put, he hates fun in all of its form. Much like Edward, he can't stand Lazlo, and loves trying to make things rough for him. When Edward broke Lazlo's ankle, he was actually happy about the whole ordeal. When Lazlo went missing in the TV movie Where's Lazlo, Lumpus was only worried about him because he feared what Commander Huha would do to him if he lost a scout. The commander is about the only person Lumpus seems to respect, but even then, it is only born out of extreme fear. Lumpus has no problem making fun of him behind his back. He also detests the rest of the campers, and not just Lazlo. He loves to confiscate their goodies and use them for his own amusement. Slickman isn't safe from Lumpus's wrath either. He never pays the poor slug, and has even poured salt on him in the past, nearly killing him. Lumpus was also the reason Slickman's career as a daredevil never panned out, as he sabotaged one of his more dangerous stunts. Anytime Lumpus does seem to care for another person, it's usually just him using them for his own goals. He started a friendship with Clam after seeing his extreme talent, but that was only because he wanted fame and fortune from the attention that he would receive. The only character we can definitely say Lumpus cares about is Miss Doe. He is madly in love with her, and the two even marry in the last season. Unfortunately for Lumpus, the relationship is short-lived, as he is exposed as an imposter in the final episode. For the entire show, he was impersonating the real Scoutmaster, who he had locked away. This revelation gets Lumpus arrested, making him the only character on the list to serve prison time. While that definitely makes him a bad egg, there is still one character who outdoes him. We're giving the Gold Medal of Evil to Miss Mucus. She is a warthog who assists Jane Doe and acts as an antagonist in several episodes, just like Edward and Lumpus. Unlike those two, however, she has even less redeeming qualities. She's not like Edward, whose mean spirit you could partially chalk up to being a kid, and she's not like Lumpus, who at the very least cared about Jane. She is an all-around nasty person and doesn't appear to find much joy in life. She is the polar opposite of Jane Doe, who is almost always cheery and optimistic. She utterly hates the Bean Scouts and even almost got their camp shut down by making them fail their physicals. You could argue that she is the reason many of the Squirrel Scouts hold so much resentment towards the Beans. She also confiscates any Bean Scout toys she gets a hold of, similarly to Lumpus. Speaking of Lumpus, it's something of a running gag in the show for her to pelt Lumpus and Slickman's boat with watermelons whenever they come to the Squirrel Scout camp. She doesn't seem to have much in the way of friends, and she's totally fine keeping it that way. Probably the most insane thing about her, though, is that she has no problem attacking children. She beat Edward to a pulp not once, but twice. Lumpus isn't exactly good with kids, but at least he wouldn't do that, with a lack of any redeeming traits and a complete disregard for those around her. How could we not give her the Gold Medal of Evil? With the morality spectrum out of the way, let's wrap things up with some medals. The Darwin Medal is going to Chip and Skip. With how little they seem to understand what is going on around them, could we really give the medal to anyone else? We're giving the Wrath Medal to Commander Huha, on account of his anger issues and high expectations. The Sloth Medal goes to Nurse Leslie. Seems pretty fitting for a person who just sits in a chair all day. The Envy Medal is going to Samson, who wants nothing more than to have the status of other Bean Scouts. The Gluttony Medal goes to Raj. I mean, have you ever seen this guy eat marshmallows? The Pride Medal we have to give to Edward, given that he thinks he's above every other Bean Scout. Finally, we give the Lust Medal to Scoutmaster Lumpus. based on his insane obsession with Miss Doe. But let us know in the comments section if you agree with our ranking, and tell us what we should cover next. Remember to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters in your favorite cartoons, shows, and movies. But most importantly, stay wicked.